How you doing? I'm CK with Under Pressure Power and Performance, and today we're going to go over our installation on our C6 Z06 twin turbo kit. This covers the C6 Z06 as well as the C6 Grand Sport. We redesigned this kit for the dry sump oil system, but it should be able to bolt pretty much up to any C6 as well if you don't want to use the other kit, if you'd rather have the top mount design. Because this one's a little bit different than our last C6 where they were mounted in the fenders. They're actually going to be top mount twin turbo design where they're inside the engine bay. So we'll go ahead and get started on that right now. Okay, now one of the first things that we're going to do is disconnect the battery. And just in case we need into the trunk later, we're going to go ahead and pop the hatch on the trunk. We're just going to place a rag back here, and then that way the trunk stays popped and won't close. Because once we disconnect the battery, then the electronics are going to work to be able to pop the trunk. Alright, so the first thing we're going to start with is removing all of the stuff that we don't need. So we're going to start with, on the exhaust side, you want to remove the mid pipes. That's the section with the cats in it. We're going to remove the manifolds themselves, the exhaust manifolds. We're going to move all of the intake structure up here with the mass air meter, the filter assembly, all of that, the radiator cover that goes on this. We're also going to remove the alternator and then the power steering pump. What we're after on the power steering pump is actually going to be the power steering pump bracket, because we're going to be trimming and cutting that down here in a little bit. And then the alternator will get reinstalled with our own bracket on it. Also the upper radiator hose here, so we're going to go ahead and drain the cooling system now. Make sure you get it all emptied out. That way it makes it a lot easier and a lot cleaner when we're working. The radiator coolant, or the reservoir itself that was sitting over here, we removed that. We're going to be relocating that as well. The coil packs come off. Now these come off and just as an assembly. For right now, let's just go ahead and leave it as an assembly, because what we're going to do is we're going to need to mark each one of the coil packs as far as where it goes in the system before we put it back in, that we can get our firing order and everything else correct on it. You also notice we went ahead and pulled the bumpers and the fender off. The front bumper is going to need to come off when we go to do our intercooler and stuff. The fenders don't necessarily need to come off. We usually pull them off just as good practice, so that way we're not actually scratching them up when we're working and leaning over them and that and tearing them up. But for the most part, they shouldn't really need to come off. And that should be about it. We're also going to loosen up and take the brackets off of the oil cooler up front there. And now we're going to start shuffling some stuff and moving it around, making clearance for the turbos themselves. And we're also going to start heat wrapping everything. All right, one of the first things we're going to relocate is going to be the fuse box assembly here. Now it's got two studs that bolted on with two nuts here and here. So we're going to go ahead and remove those. And then this just pops up, and we're going to push it back and slide all the wiring back with it. And the front stud right here, or the front hole, is going to mount on where the rear stud was. Set it back down like that, and then we'll go ahead and bolt this into place, and that's going to put our fuse box clear back here, so that we've got a lot more room cleaned up here. Okay, for the next part here, what we're going to cover is going to be the cooling system relocation. Now you can see we took out the reservoir from that side over there, and then this is the hose that was connecting to it, and it's connecting to our heater core here. So what we did is you're going to disconnect it. This line here is going to the thermostat housing, and the line that we have connected now was attached right here. So we cut it right here, and then we're going to reattach this to the thermostat housing. So this whole T section here, we're just going to completely get rid of. So right now we've got the two of them that are going to the housing are basically just going back to the heater core assembly. And then what we're going to do is this one that we relocated now, we're going to come back in here and cut this in a little bit, put a T fitting in it, and that's going to go to our radiator reservoir, which is now going to sit over here. The other one that we're going to change around is this is the vent tube, the steam vent tube that went also to the top of the reservoir on the passenger side over there, or I'm sorry, on the driver's side. And then it's connected right by the throttle body, and then it's connected over here to the top of the radiator. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this. We're actually going to twist it about like this here. We're going to come in here and cut this line right here, so that way you've got a good 3 or 4 inches, and then this is going to go to the radiator. This one's going to go to our reservoir that we have, and then this one here, we're going to remove this, and we're going to extend the line and run a new line over to our throttle body. So basically all we're doing is taking what was right over here, and then we're shifting it over here, so that way it's attaching to our new reservoir, which is now going to be located on the passenger side instead of the driver's side. Okay, for the next section here, what we're going to do is go ahead and get ready the spark plug wires that we're going to be putting on there. It's much easier to get to these now before we put the manifolds on. You can still get to them afterwards. It's just going to be easier to route them and get them all set up and situated and zip tied exactly the way we want them. So actually right now is going to be a good time to do the spark plugs too, especially if they're, the original factory plugs and that they're kind of used and worn out. We generally recommend a TR7IX by NGK. Check with your tuner though, see what they recommend, because it's going to really depend upon what your application is, how much boost you're pushing, that sort of thing, as far as what kind of plug they want in there. TR6 is basically your stock plug, so we're going one heat range colder with a TR7. Alright, so to make the spark plug wires, you guys are sent the wires themselves, and then you've got another pack with the LS1 specific boot ends on them, which are going to be the right angle here and the little clips that go with them. The clips and the right angles that come in the spark plug wire set, we're not going to use those, so you can just throw those away. All we're after in the set is going to be actually the spark plug wire itself with the 90-degree boot on it. Now, each side is going to have 2 wires that are 12 inches and 2 wires that are 18 inches. So in total, you'll have 4 wires that are 12 inches long and 4 wires that are 18 inches long. And we measure that from the end where the 90-degree angle here is to the tip of it here. So to put these together and assemble them, it's easiest first if you get a bucket of hot water, and you can throw it in the microwave or whatever, warm it up, and actually warm up these ends and get them to where they're a little bit more pliable, and that way they're a little bit easier to work with when they're nice and warm. And then you stick a needle nose plier in it and kind of stretch it out a little bit. Now don't get too carried away and just rip this thing open, because it will actually rip the boot on it. So you want to stretch it like that. And we kind of do that from both ends, and then what we'll actually do is, while we're making one wire, we'll prep the next one so it's actually stretching out already and it's pre-stretched by the time we get to it. This is the lube that we generally use. It's a water-based. It's Klein Tools. You can get it like Home Depot. It's just a lubricant for doing house wiring and stuff when you're running it through conduit. It seems to work pretty well for this since it's a water-based. So what we do is actually lube up the end of this here, and then we'll lube up where we're going to slide it through on the spark plug wire end here. And then we'll slip it through until it's protruding through, basically just like that. Next thing we're going to do is, using our strippers, we'll cut it back. So you got about 3/4 to 1 inch worth of the actual core that's sticking out of it like that. Then we'll take the clip here, and we're actually going to fold this over like this, and then the clip is going to sit on it like that. So if you look at it from one end, you're basically taking this, and that way the core is going to sit in the very base of the clip down there. And then using a set of pliers, we'll go ahead and squish this together. And what we're actually trying to do while we do this is get it to where it bites into the wire, the edges of this clip. So you can see it's actually contacting it like that, and then we'll squish them to where it actually goes in. So what you're doing is you're taking it, and as you fold them over, you don't just want it to close like this. You want to actually get them to bite onto the wire and dig and actually penetrate into the wire. That way it's nice and secure and snug on there once you get done. And once that's done, very carefully, don't pull too hard because you'll slip the boot back over, and then you got to start over. And the hardest part's getting the boot over the wire the first time. So you're going to slip it back till it's sticking out about that much. Once we get this actually on the coil pack, you'll be able to slide it up a little bit further, but for now, just leave it that much. That way you know this is protruding out enough that it sinks deep enough into the coil pack. You should actually hear it click when you do that. And then once you get done, if there's any, if it sits on the coil, grab them quick. So when it clips onto the coil like this, if you've got any that's hanging out like that, you can slide this back up over the top of it once you get it in there. So go ahead and make your spark plug wires now, and like I said again, there's 4 of them that are 12 inches and 4 of them that are 18 inches. And once you get those made, we'll go ahead and show you how they go in the car. Okay, now for the spark plug wires, we've got one that's 18 and one that's 12 inches. And what we're essentially going to do is on the coil pack side, you're going to get them pretty close to lined up. And then as we put them in there, the frontmost cylinder is going to be the short 12, oops, here, and then the second cylinder back, so number 2, is going to be the 18. So as you put these in, you're going to want to zip tie the second one to the primary, and that's going to kind of help support it and hold it. And then these are going to come and kind of wrap around the front of the head, and then they'll go into the coil packs, which we're going to push up here later. For the rear, it's going to be pretty much the exact opposite. The very last cylinder gets the fourth one back, gets the short one, and the third one back gets the 18-inch one, and it's going to go in there and wrap around the back side of the cylinder head. So when we get done, we're going to have 2 coil packs up front and 2 coil packs back here in the rear. You can see we've got the wires in here. So you've got your short one here in the front, followed by your 18, and we've got them zip tied here. And then in the back, the same thing, and they route back around behind the head and come up here, and these 2 will route around the front of the head and come up here. And go ahead and do that on both sides, so that way everything's all set up in there, and then we should be good to start installing the manifolds in that. All right, next thing we're going to do is modify some of the vacuum lines and stuff, because some of the vacuum sources can't take pressure once we start adding boost. The first one is going to be the crankcase right here. It's this little horseshoe. So what we're going to do is pull this line out, and what it does is it goes between right behind the throttle body to the valley cover on the crankcase. You can see the 2 little nipples there. Now the top one that's behind the throttle body, that's what we're actually going to use as our boost vacuum source. So if you're running a boost gauge, or when we go to our blow-off valves, that's where we're going to tie that into. The other one down there that's going to the valley, we just go ahead and leave that one open, let it vent to atmosphere. If you do notice that you're starting to get like oil residue and stuff coming out of there, you can always install a catch can. That'll help collect everything. You usually only see that if you have, a lot of added crankcase pressure. The other ones that we're going to remove are going to be these evap lines here. Now there was a solenoid here. We went ahead and already removed that because that's going to be in the way later. And we're going to go ahead and take those lines off as well. And it clips right here to the other side, right behind the throttle body. So we're just going to go ahead and take that, remove it, and then we'll go ahead and come back. This one here goes to the evap vent, which is going to the gas tank. We're going to go ahead and remove that and just discard of it as well. Okay, the last of the vacuum that we're going to take off and discard of is the one that goes between the dry sump here, and it used to go up to the intake here. We'll go ahead and discard of that as well. That will no longer be going to the intake. We're moving all these because most of whatever it's going to can't stand boost pressure. So you don't want to pump, once the turbo's spool, you don't want to put boost pressure into the dry sump, you don't want to put boost pressure into your crankcase, and you don't want to put boost pressure through the evap lines back to your gas tank. Okay, next thing we're going to do, as you can see, is going to start heat wrapping basically all this stuff right over here. Our manifold's going to come out and it's going to swing right around here, and our turbo's going to sit here. So anything that's in this area here, you can see we've heat wrapped it real well. Now this is where we're going to actually splice into a little bit later. So we made sure we left enough room on there for some hose clamps, because we're going to actually cut here and put a T in it that's going to go up to our reservoir here. But all of the hoses, the AC lines, the wiring, the electrical here, all of this stuff that's in this area, we went ahead and wrapped it up. Alright, for the next section here, we're going to go ahead and install the manifolds. Now, this is the passenger side here, and it'll swoop out towards the fender, and then back in where the turbo goes. Now, you can either reuse the factory gaskets, or what we do, because it actually seems to seal better, is use silicone. Not RTVT, but actually 100% pure silicone. It's made of silica sand. It's actually got a higher melting point than the steel does. So what we're going to do is just put a real thin, light smear layer on here, and then bolt the manifold up using the existing factory bolts that the manifolds came off with. It's also a good idea to go ahead and use some anti-seize on the bolts, that way you can get them out later if you ever have to. Alright, for the next section here, now we got the manifold in, we're going to go ahead and mock up the turbo. So just bolt it on there real quick and loose with a couple of bolts, and what we're going to do is get the clocking down. Now what you want to do is there's 6 bolts on the compressor here, and there's 6 bolts on the turbine. It's these right here. We're going to loosen those up, and that's going to give us the ability to spin the turbine, the cartridge, and the compressor independently of each other. Now the oil feed for the cartridge needs to be facing straight up. Obviously the turbine is going to be bolted there. And then the compressor here is going to be kind of a 45 degree, just a little bit under a 45 degree angle, facing down and in, just like that. Once you get that set, go ahead and lock each one of them, tighten at least a couple bolts on each one, and then what we'll do is we'll pull the turbo back out, tighten all the bolts up on it, because it's a lot easier to get to all the bolts once it's out of the car, and then we'll go ahead and prep it by putting our oil feed and our oil return fittings on it. Alright, so now that we've got the manifold in, you can kind of see the orientation on how everything's laid out, and you'll get an idea of where we're going to be running everything. So these electrical here, and then the heater core lines, we're going to pull them up and tuck them as tight as we can. Now this AC line here, you're going to have to bend it and tweak it a little bit to get it to where it's tucked under and tucked down nice, so it's not touching or too close to the manifold here. When you do that, just be real careful that you don't actually kink it when you bend it. because then you can crack it or it'll stop flowing at that point. So we want to just tuck everything over here and put it, you know, really nice and out of the way, and pull it up. The turbo's gonna be sitting right here, and then our downpipe is actually gonna snake right through here and go down. So right down below here we have one big AC line, and you can see the bracket we installed down here to actually mount and hold that. And in just a minute we'll show you from underneath the car so you can get a little bit better idea, because this is the AC line. Normally sits up here like this. What we're actually going to do is take it and pull it down and then strap it to this bracket here to keep it out of the way, and that way it's got plenty of clearance room against the downpipe. You can also see, because the manifold's coming up here over close to the valve cover, we went ahead and heat wrapped all the stuff up here. It's going to be all the injector wires, and then when we go and do the coil pack setups on here, we're going to go ahead and heat wrap the wiring and everything for those two to keep everything nice and cool and away from the heat. Now for the radiator reservoir relocate, this is the one wire, or the one hose that we trimmed back earlier, and we connected it right to here. Right about here we're making a cut in it, and this is where we're going to connect it to our reservoir. Now to prepare the reservoir to install, you're going to go ahead and install the T-fitting along with the 2 5/8 hose barb fittings, and then on the one up here you're going to do your 90° with the 3/8 on it. And then this is going to actually sit in here basically just like this. We're going to connect one of those hoses to here, one out, and then our steam tube line, which we again relocated from previously, which goes from the steam tube on the head to the top of the radiator, and then it's coming up over here. We cut this down a little bit short, and then it's going to slide right in there, and this reservoir is going to sit right in here just like this. Now the two mounting tabs will actually mount where the fuse box used to be located, and we're going to mount it under the fuse box. So what we'll do is we'll slide this up, we'll mount it right here, right there, drop the fuse box back down, bolted everything up, and then we'll connect all of our hoses and lines to it. Okay, now this is from the underside, on the passenger side. Here's our AC line that we just had up top, and this is the bracket that we installed. And you see we just used 2 self-tapping screws, the sheet metal screws. Now if you have a right angle drill or a air ratchet, those usually work easiest to get these in, since it's not a lot of room to get an actual full drill up in here. But what we're going to do is pull this down here, basically as much as it'll go, and then kind of mark where it's at on the low point, and that's where you're going to drill and mount the bracket for the AC line there. Now on the front of the AC line, where it turns to solid aluminum, you're going to need to bend and tweak that just a little bit, and then again on the back side back here to try and get this line down as much as possible and get it out of the way, so that way there's plenty of room in here clearance wise for the downpipe. Now what we're going to do is use our 1.5" hose clamp here. We'll slide it right through our bracket, and then we'll tighten this up, and this will hold and secure the line down out of the way. That way it won't pop back up or rub against the downpipe or get burnt at all. Alright, next what we're going to do is get the turbo prepared to go in and installed. And what we're going to do is mount it in there loosely like this, get it all clocked like we showed you a little bit earlier. Now we pulled it out, we're going to tighten everything back up on it. We're also going to go ahead and install our oil feed fitting right here. Now with this, you just want to use a little bit of RTV sealant or Teflon tape, tighten it down, and then Teflon tape on the bottom one here going into the adapter plate. And then the adapter plate is going to bolt on with the 2 M8 125 Allen head screws here. Now when this sits in there, it'll be sitting in there like that. We want on the passenger side here the 90° fitting to be facing towards in and just a little slight angle towards the front of the car. That way you've got enough clearance room. It's not up against the Allen head bolt here when you go to actually tighten the AN line on it for the oil drain. Now, the oil drain here should be on the bottom, of course, and the oil feed on the top. So everything's all set up like that, ready for it to go in. And then the last piece that we're going to need to install is going to be the 5-bolt adapter here. If you've got the 6182 turbos, there's going to be a couple of differences. You're still going to have the same fitting up here, or a fitting up here. Yours is going to be brass, and it's going to be actually a restrictor for the ball bearings, and then you'll have a similar fitting like this on the bottom. Your 5-bolt flange will actually only be a 4-bolt flange. Now, when we install these, you'll notice that right over here there's a wastegate hole on the turbo. In case you're using internal wastegates, we're not. So what we're going to do is seal this up with silicone. Again, the same silicone we used mounting the manifold itself. So you just put a really light thin layer, smear it all around, and especially get it around the wastegate hole so that way it creates a seal on that. We don't want any of the exhaust gases leaking out from the wastegate hole out this side. or from the actual main part here. So we'll go ahead and get that all bolted on like that, and now we'll go ahead and mount this in the car. Alright, now that we've got the main frame of the turbo bolted in there, the next section we're going to do is going to be the first section of the downpipe. Now, for the passenger side, it's going to be the shorter of the two downpipes, and it's the one without the flex sections. And the way this is going to mount in there is the V-band will mount to the turbo, and then it curves around, kind of swooping around the engine and then back down. Now, how we're going to put this in there is going to be from the back side here. We're just going to loop it in through like that, and then it'll come up and mate you there. And now you can see how it kind of curves around the manifold and the piping and that. This is going to make sure, or give us a visual so we can make sure that all of our hoses and electrical is clearing both up here as well as the AC line that's down there. So now that we got that in, we'll go ahead and take our V-band clamp here, clamp this in place. We're just going to leave it a little bit loose for now. That way this has some rotation ability on it, and it can adjust for when we put the second section of the downpipe in a little bit later. Alright, for the next part we're going to be doing is, and you can kind of see we've already done it, you're going to want to remove the power steering pump here, and you have to take off the pulley to get to the two bolts, and then you're going to remove this bracket behind it. Now you can kind of see where we've cut it right here. It's going to be just basically below the valve cover, and then basically we just cut it flat and then go in and grind it and kind of smooth it up and make it look nice, because our bracket here for the alternator is actually going to be sitting right up in here. So you need to make sure you can kind of hold this up and mark your line on it, make sure it clears. Now the bolt hole here in the bracket is going to bolt right up to the head here, and then this other bolt hole here is going to be bolting right to there where the factory one was. So the ears that are holding, used to hold the alternator here, the little assembly, we're going to just cut that clean off, and then it's going to allow us room to mount our alternator in there. The next thing you're going to do, there might be casting lines depending on your water pump. You can see the casting line still in this one here, and you can see we've shaved it down here. You might need to go in and grind that down a little bit if this, when you go to put this on, if it's hitting and the bolt holes aren't aligning. So next we'll go ahead and bolt up the alternator assembly. And the way this goes in is basically this is going to bolt to the block through this hole here, and then the two pins are going to interlock into the block like this, and then your alternator is going to bolt right up to it just like that. So we'll go ahead and get that installed, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Okay, now as we install this, we got the main bolt on here, and then we got the lower bolt there. Before we tighten and put this last bolt in here, we're going to want to actually weave the belt up inside of here like that, because it's actually going to come off of the water pump, the bottom side of the water pump, and then it'll go directly vertical on the outside of this bottom post, but it's actually going to come on the inside. So you don't want it out here like this, it's going to come on the inside of this post here, and then we'll go ahead and rotate this back into place like that. And this should be using the factory belt on it here. You shouldn't need to go to anything smaller, and everything should just kind of drop back in the exact same way it was, with the exception that this pulley here. And you want to make sure that you're clearing your steam coolant tube down here, of course, and then that the belt is actually clearing away from the bottom post. Okay, now as we install this, we got the main bolt on here, and then we got the lower bolt there. Before we tighten and put this last bolt in here, we're going to want to actually weave the belt up inside of here like that, because it's actually going to come off of the water pump, the bottom side of the water pump, and then it'll go directly vertical on the outside of this bottom post, but it's actually going to come on the inside. So you don't want it out here like this, it's going to come on the inside of this post here, and then we'll go ahead and rotate this back into place like that. And this should be using the factory belt on it here. You shouldn't need to go to anything smaller, and everything should just kind of drop back in the exact same way it was, with the exception that this pulley here. And you want to make sure that you're clearing your steam coolant tube down here, of course, and then that the belt is actually clearing away from the bottom post. Alright, for the very bottom bolt and then the upper bolt, the two with the posts, we're going to be using the M10 1.5 by 195 millimeter bolts, and then you're going to have a washer on them. This one up here, you'll have a washer on both ends and then a nut on the back side, and that's how we're going to tighten it down. And then the one that bolts right to the head here is going to be an M10 1.5 by 30 millimeters. So we're going to get everything in line, and then you can see it has a little bit of playroom in it. We want to try and get this as centered up as possible on here, and then we'll go ahead and tighten everything down and lock it in place so the alternator sits on there just like that. Alright, now here you can see the final install of the alternator as well as the belt routing. So we're going to come off the crank, go to our tensioner, from the tensioner under the water pump. From the water pump, we're going to go on the outside of that post up to the alternator. From the alternator down on the inside of the second post to our power steering pump. From our power steering pump over the idler, and then back down to the crank there. And so that's what it should look like once you get it installed. Basically kind of keeping it in the same place, just reversing its location. Alright, next we're going to modify the power steering pump reservoir so that way it can mount back up and drain into the power steering pump there. So what you're going to do, this bracket mates the power steering pump, just pull the little tab and slide it off. And then as you're looking at it, this corner here, we went ahead and cut that off, and then we smoothed it out and rounded it out so that way it's nice and flush. We're going to go ahead and install this back in there with the aluminum bracket here, and it's basically going to mount up to the engine like that. And we'll show you what it looks like and where it goes here in just a second. Alright, now for the power steering pump relocate, what we did is we do the 1/2 inch ID hose, and it's going to go onto the power steering pump here, and then the hose clamp, and then we're going to bring it over underneath the alternator right up to the reservoir there. And you can see here's the bracket that we just trimmed on just a second ago, and this is the L bracket, so the power steering pump reservoir is going to sit right there, and then we've got our aluminum bracket here that bolts to the head, and that's going to bolt up to the head there with a M10 1.5 by 20 millimeter bolt with a washer. And then again here with the M10 1.5 by 20 millimeter bolt with 2 washers and the nut, and that's just going to clamp it together. Now with this, there is some rotational room, some adjustability that way, as well as some adjustability this way. So you can kind of rotate this thing around until you get it. It needs to be that the hose is, 1, not kinked, because you obviously won't get any flow if it's kinked. 2, you need to make sure that it's a downward slope from where it's at. So it gives you a little bit of adjustability and playroom. Also, you want to make sure you're not actually hitting the hood up here either, so you want to test fit it with it closed. But that's going to support our power steering pump reservoir. And then the other line that's going to the reservoir for the return basically is coming right off the power steering cooler down there, and it just extends over. So it was sitting, over here, and we're just basically taking it, relocating it over here. The one hose stays the same, and then the other one, that bigger 1/2 inch hose, we're replacing. So you basically just, you can see it bolted up right there, and with the hose clamp on each end. Alright, for the next part here, what we're going to be doing is shifting the radiator forward. So what we need for that is going to be our radiator drop brackets. They look like this. They've got 2 big holes that are just smooth bore, and then 2 threaded holes. What we're going to do, the radiator carriage assembly here, go ahead and unbolt that, and then we're going to slide it forward. Now you can see we've actually already got our radiator drop brackets up in here. What we're going to do, the factory bolts are going to go into the big holes, and that's going to bolt the radiator drop bracket to the frame. And then we're going to use the M8 1.25 by 15 millimeter bolts with a washer on them, and that's going to bolt the carriage frame assembly to this. So what it's actually doing, when we take it and look at it like this, is we're shifting. This is the hole where it was mounted to, and which we're going to use these 2 holes to mount the bracket to, and then these 2 holes here are where we're actually mounting the carriage assembly to. So we're dropping it down a 1/2 inch, and we're going to shift it forward 2 inches, and we're going to do that on both sides, as you can see. So this whole carriage assembly came down a 1/2 inch and shifted forward 2 inches. Also, what we're going to go ahead and do at this point, since we're down here, is unbolt the brackets that are holding the oil cooler assembly here. We're going to be bolting that up in just a minute. That way it's nice and free to move around, because we're going to be putting our intercooler here in just a few minutes. Alright, next what we're going to be doing is relocating and slightly moving the ABS unit here. So what you want to do first is take the sway bar here out of the way. That'll give you some more room. Now there's 2 bolts holding this whole ABS bracket and unit assembly up on there. You can go ahead and take both those bolts out. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the whole bracket and we're going to shift it down. So what was the bottom bolt hole before is now here. and then this bolt hole here is non-existent, so we're going to go ahead and drill this out, and then we're going to attach our M8 1.25 by 40 millimeter bolt through there with a nut. You can see the nut on the back side of it there. So again, if you're looking at it, to clarify, you got the 2 bolt holes here. The 2 bolt holes used to be here and here, and then all we did was we shifted it down. So the top bolt hole is now where the bottom bolt hole was, and the bottom bolt hole we're going to drill a new hole for right there. And then we're also going to come and put a shim plate on the back side of this to help even it up and keep it level. So all we're really doing is dropping the whole ABS unit down just a hair. It's going to give it a little bit more clearance room up top. Once we got that done, we'll go ahead and bolt the sway bar and everything back up on the bottom side here. Alright, now as we prepare to do the install on this side over here on the driver's side, we're going to do the same thing we did over there. We're going to heat wrap all the wiring up in here. We're going to heat wrap the wiring down in here. Now the brake lines in that should actually already have heat wrap on them, so they should be good. Just make sure they're tucked nicely out of the way. We need to do the coolant temperature sensor there. Now for the brake, I'm going to heat wrap the brake line as well, or the vacuum hose from the brake booster. It's sitting down here like this. What we need to actually do is pull it and go over the top of the fuel rail, and so this 90-degree bend is going, instead of going sideways like this, it's going to be facing up. So I'm going to try and get as much clearance room in here as we can, keep everything away that heat is going to, you know, damage or hurt. So we can pull that back, and that way we've got room for our manifold and our downpipe in here. Alright, next thing we're going to install is actually going to be our heat shield here. Now this goes on the brake master cylinder, and this covers up the reservoir on it. So what we're going to do is the inside bolt on the master cylinder, we'll go ahead and take that out, and that's going to bolt right up to here. This cover basically just slides on, and the 1 bolt hole there is what's going to hold it. So you take the nut off, slide this on, screw it back on, and you can see we've already got this one here installed on there. And it just slides over like that, so that way once we have the manifold in later like this, it'll protect it and keep the heat away from it. Okay, and then the one last thing before we do the install the manifold, we want to set up the spark plug wires. Now these are going to be the same as we did on the other side. So you basically just got the one that chains up, the longer one chains up to the shorter one here. We'll zip tie it, same thing here. You got the longer one, goes over and right where it mates or crosses the shorter one, go ahead and zip tie it, and those go around basically behind the head and behind the valve cover. And these will cross over in the front of the head like this, because our coil packs are going to sit here and here essentially once we get done. Now we should be good to go ahead and install the manifold on here. Alright, now we're ready to go ahead and install our manifold in here, but once we get the manifold in, the downpipe doesn't really fit in so well, so it's easiest if we set the downpipe up in there kind of where it goes first, and then we'll put the manifold in and bolt it on. That way the downpipe's in there, because the V-band's so big it has a hard time squeezing past the steering shaft there. Now this is kind of how this goes. It'll come off the turbo here and then curvature and go down. If you get it backwards, it'll look kind of goofy and it'll go in the wrong direction out towards the car. So it should be pretty easy to figure out which way is forward on it. And again, this is the other section, the first section of the driver's side downpipe, which does not have any flex joints in it. So what we're going to do is set this in here. Now, when this is set up in there, the downpipe is actually going to cross over right in between runners 3 and 4 on this side here. So it should look something like that there. So what we want to do is kind of set the downpipe in there first and hold on to it while you put the actual manifold in. And it'll go kind of like that. Once it's in there, the downpipe will move around a little bit freely, and that's fine, just as long as it stays up in there. And we'll go ahead and bolt the manifold up in there now. So what we're going to do is actually silicone it just like we did the other side, and get everything so it's nice and secure up in there, and then we'll go ahead and bolt the manifold on. Alright, and the last piece before we do a final installation of the driver's side turbo here is what we're going to do is install the oil line, because it's a lot harder to get to once it's up in there. The passenger side one, there's still plenty of room, so we don't have to worry about that right now. But on the driver's side one, we want to go ahead and attach, it's going to be the short dash 10 oil line with the 90 and the 90. And what you can do is screw this on to our oil drain fitting, and we want this pointing basically directly backwards with the car, so that way this one here is pointed down. Because what we're going to do is come down and right over towards the bottom driver's side oil pan here, and that's where we're going to make our oil return. Okay, now we started on the other side. We went ahead and did the same thing. We bolted up the manifold. We did the turbo, clocked it into position, pulled it back off, tightened up all 12 of our bolts, and then we went ahead and did the final install on that. Now, we still have our downpipe in here, and this is just going to slide right up in place and mate with our V-band here, and we'll go ahead and clamp that down. And we'll leave it loose just the same as we did the other side, so that when we get to the second section of the downpipe, there's a little bit of adjustability and playroom. Now for the clocking on this one, it's going to go almost vertical if you see it coming out here. What we usually do is we'll stick the silicone coupler on here. Now this one's going to be a 2.5 inch, or I'm sorry, a 2 inch to 2.5 inch on a 45-degree bend. And it should be coming off, and basically just slide it onto the turbo and then rotate the turbo up towards just the coupler is just barely touching the alternator like that, and that's kind of the orientation of it. And then again, the oil feed on top and the oil return on bottom. Now for the oil return on bottom, the passenger side over there, we had a 90-degree fitting that screwed into the bottom. This side on the driver's side over here is going to be a straight fitting. Aside from that, it's pretty much assembled in the same way, and just go ahead and bolt it up. Alright, next set of heat shielding I'm going to install is actually going to be the turbo blankets. They're pretty self-explanatory. If you look at the turbo blanket, it curves one way. That curvature should match the turbo itself. So you basically just put it on, kind of like a diaper that goes around it, and then there's the 2 springs that'll attach to the 1 union point on this side, and then to each of the clips that look like this on the other side, and basically just spring and kind of hold it on there, and that helps keep the heat inside the turbo. Alright, for the next section here, we're going to concentrate on installing the intercooler. Now we already got the radiator drop brackets installed, which is dropped the radiator down and shifted it forward. But with the passenger side lower radiator line disconnected, you'll notice it's a little bit short and it won't go back on. So what we're actually going to do is extend it. So what you want to do is pull the lower radiator line out, and you can kind of see we marked little markings in it here before we cut it to basically draw a straight line. Then cut it, and then we're going to slide our 1.5 inch coupler or spacer up inside there, and then we're going to clamp it down with our 2 hose clamps here. Now this basically is just extending it, giving us a little bit more length room. That way when the radiator shifted forward like this, it's got enough room to still attach to it. So we'll go ahead and get this reinstalled up in there, and then we'll start working on the intercooler itself. Alright, for the next part here, we're going to be installing the intercooler. So what we're going to do first is the oil cooler here. Let's take the brackets and everything off of it, so that way it's free and loose. And we're actually going to slide this up and slide the hose assembly lines up past the radiator and past the AC condenser, so it's sitting up on top like that out of the way. Because when we get done, that's actually going to sit on top of the intercooler. But for now, we're just going to push it up out of the way. Then we're going to go ahead and pull the bolts out that are holding the cover on here, or the skid dampener, and slide our intercooler in here. And our intercooler is going to bolt up right here and here, and it should just sit flush in there. If it's really tight, right now the bottom of your radiator, both of the pins should be in these 2 holes down here with the rubber mounts, where they went originally from the factory. Like I said, since we dropped the radiator down, slid it forward. And with that, the radiator now should actually lean more. So if this is really tight getting the radiator up in here, just kind of push and press on the radiator and set it back some more, and it'll actually lean back more. That way you can get the radiator or the intercooler and everything up in there. And then when we put the vanity cover on top later, that'll kind of address and hold the radiator and everything in position. Alright, now here you can see we've gone ahead and got the intercooler installed up there, and like I said, it slides up in there like that. Going to bolt on right there. Now we'll go ahead and take a look from the top side, and we'll show you how to mount up the oil cooler itself. Okay, now as you can see, we've got the oil cooler mounted up in here like this, and basically it should be flushed up against the other ones and right about the same height as the AC condenser here. And make sure you got a little bit of a gap in between here that's going to be enough to get our silicone coupler around the intercooler piping itself. And you can see this side over here is still a little bit loose, so what we're going to actually do is use this bracket here. This is going to be our steel bracket to relocate it, and then an M8 1.25 by 20 millimeter bolt. Now this is going to go right in, and it's going to bolt into, we've got the 2 mounting points on this side here, it's going to bolt into the lower one, and then this is going to slide under the frame rail on this side here, and then we're going to attach this on the bottom to the actual frame rail. So we'll show you that, what it looks like in just a second here once we get done. Okay, now we're looking at it from the bottom side again. This is our bracket that we just installed here, supporting the oil cooler. And again, it drops down right under the frame rail here. And then we're just going to use a self-tapping sheet metal screw and drill it right into the frame. And now all that should be nice and secure, so that way the oil cooler assembly is not going anywhere. Alright, now you can see one final look from the top of what it should look like when it's all mounted. And oil cooler is nice and secure in there. The intercooler is nice and secure in there. One thing I do want to take note and mention is right there and there on both sides. Those are going to be your ABS sensors. So when you're installing the intercooler, make sure you don't pinch the wiring or catch it. Make sure that the actual intercooler is not sitting up against it to where it's going to hit it, or that it doesn't have enough free motion where it can smack into it. You don't want to be driving down the road and this thing vibrating and hit against that thing and blow your airbag on you. So make sure that there is a sufficient gap in between there. Alright, for the next part we're going to do the intercooler piping itself here. It's easy if I just kind of mock it up and show you what it looks like outside the car, that way you have an idea once you put it in. This here is going to be the passenger side, and basically you're going to come off the turbo, which is already pointed on the passenger side here at a 45-degree angle down. So we're going to catch it right here with a 45-degree silicone coupler, and then there's just a one-piece pipe that goes around and connects with a 2 to 2.5 inch reducer directly into the intercooler. And you're just going to take this from the bottom, slide it right up into place, put all your T-bolt clamps in place, and tighten everything down. And this will be, you know, you have your pulleys and stuff right here, and then this will kind of match the contour in the slope of the radiator there. Now, for the driver's side, there's going to be actually two pieces to it. So we're going to come off, which your turbo on your driver's side is already pointing directly to the passenger side and completely horizontal there. So we're going to attach our 2-inch coupler on a 45-degree angle there, and then we're going to have the longer pipe coming off of it. Now, if you're looking at it, the shorter side of the longer pipe is going to be on top, and then the longer side, the one with the long section here, is going to be on the bottom. From there, we're going to come out with a 90-degree coupler into our 90-degree small pipe, and then do a 2 to 2.5 inch reducer directly into the intercooler. And again, this is going to slide up in from the bottom, and then we'll attach everything and put our silicone coupler or our T-bolt clamps on it and tighten everything down. Alright, for the last part of the intercooler piping is going to be our upper throttle body piece, and this is going to sit basically right here like this. So we're going to have a 3-inch to 4-inch reducer that goes on the bottom here, and then our hump hose connector is going to go right up on the top here. Now, you notice it's got the mass air meter flange on it, so what you need to do is pull the mass air meter card out from your original piping, put it in here, and just go ahead and bolt it in place. And then our blow-off valve is going to go right here. That's our Turbo Smart, and that basically just bolts on. There's going to be an O-ring that sits down in there. The blow-off valve sits on there, and then we clamp it on with the V-band clamp. And then this will sit basically right in here, just like that. Okay, now to assemble the blow-off valve to the intercooler pipe, this is basically the blow-off valve assembly here. You've got the V-band clamp here, which is going to clamp it and hold it on. The O-ring, which is going to go right across the base and the bottom before we clamp it. And this will actually set right down in the recess of the pipe like that as we clamp it on, and then we'll set the blow-off valve on there like this, and then we'll use the clamp to clamp it. Now, it is important to note there are two separate ports on this blow-off valve, and the blow-off valve will come with a plug and the nipple. It doesn't matter which one you put where, just whichever one is easier for access. So this is going to sit on there like that, and we could either use that port there and plug this one, or we could rotate it to where we're going to be using this one and this one. It's just more versatility, or if you're daisy chaining, if you're running multiple blow-off valves, is why they did that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and Teflon these two fittings before we put them into the blow-off valve. That way they're airtight and sealed, and then we'll go ahead and install the blow-off valve onto the intercooler pipe here. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is install our oil return lines. Now this longest one here with the 45 and the straight is going to go over on the passenger side. So the 45 is going to connect into the 90 that we already have into the oil line, just like that. It's going to come down right across the front of the engine. Make sure it stays away from all of the belts and pulleys and such. And it's going to go over to the driver's side here where it's going to connect to our T. This one here is coming from our driver's side turbo, and now this is the one that's already installed, and then we installed in there with the turbo earlier, just to kind of show you what the mock-up looks like with it all assembled and outside the car. So that one's going to come down and go and drop into the top of the T, and then the final one is going to be the shortest line of them all, which is the straight and the 90, and that's going to connect to the other side of the T, and this is where we're going to actually drill and tap this directly into our oil pan, so that way it gets the recycled oil back into the pan itself. Okay, now we're on the driver's side lower here. You can see right by the motor mount, and the one coming up from the front there is going to be the line from the passenger side comes over to the T. Again, the 90 coming down right here, dropping down into the T, is going to be from our driver's side turbo, and then when it goes from the straight line there to our shortest line, the 90, right back to here. Now what we're going to be doing with this is coming down, and we're going to make a mark right here on our oil pan, and then we're going to go ahead and drill and tap that out with the arbor bit. That way it's got no shavings and stuff like that in it, and it's basically going to bolt up just like that. So I have a little bit slight downhill the whole way, and we're going to come in with a 90 degree right into the side of the pan here. All right, now that we've got our oil lines drain attached, we're going to go ahead and come in and tap in to the oil pan for our actual drain. Now, we went ahead and stuck our fitting on there. This is what we're going to be tapping into the pan. It's a 1/2 inch MPT to a -10, and we're going to screw that on there. That will give us, some identification as far as the spacing on it. What we're going to be going for is going to be a slight bend to this last oil line here, and we'll be coming into the pan right there. And we'll go ahead and mark it, and then we'll pinpoint it there. So ideally what we're going to do is we want to be just in front of the bolt hole here that's just in front of the drain bolt. So from your oil filter here, your 1-2 bolts of your oil pan, just slightly to the front side of that one. Now we're going to heavily grease our rotobroach bit, and this is what we're going to use to actually drill and cut into it. So you want to lube this up really good with some really thick heavy grease. The same thing with the tap when we go to tap it. Once we get done doing that, we'll go ahead and drain the oil to try and get any shavings that did get in there out. Drill real slow, because what we're trying to do, this is actually a plug cutter, so it shouldn't produce that much shavings. It should come off as long strands, and then the final piece will be actually a plug to help reduce the amount of shavings and stuff that we're creating to begin with. And then whatever shavings we do create, hopefully the grease will catch it, and then if the grease doesn't catch it, we'll drain the oil as a last result to get it out of there and kind of rinse everything down and wash it out. So we'll go ahead and drill this now, get it tapped, and then we'll show you what it looks like once we get done. Alright, now you can see that we've got the fitting installed here. So when you drill and tap this, I also want to note that it's an NPT fitting, which is a tapered fitting, meaning the deeper that you put the tap into it, the wider the hole's going to go. So as you do it in baby steps. Tap it in a quarter of the way, then test fit the fitting, see if it's tight. What you want is the fitting to be about halfway or so in there before it gets tight. Or about 1/3 of the way in before it gets tight. You want to make sure it's got a good bite on it. But if you take and you run the tap all the way through it, the fitting might be too small to actually seal up, because it's not counting on an O-ring or anything else to seal it. It's actually counting on the taper of the fitting itself. So again, don't run the tap all the way through. Do it a little bit at a time. If the fitting's still too small, run the tap in a little deeper, check the fitting again, make sure, and so on and so forth. Also, you want to RTV or Teflon tape that when you do seal that up. But you can see everything's all snugged and tied up in here now, so we've got our oil lines coming from each turbo, teeing together, and then it taps and drops right into the pan here. Alright, for this next section here, we're going to go ahead and install the oil feed assembly. And the oil feed assembly is pretty straightforward. You get your oil feed block here, and then your 2 oil lines. Now, the way we're going to assemble the oil feed block here is, first is going to be the sandwich plate that's going to go in, then a 90-degree elbow, then our 1.5-inch fitting into our T, and then finally our 2 1/8-inch to -4 male adapters. Now all of these here are MPT, and they do require Teflon tape to seal them up. The 2 MPT fittings here, as well as what's going on, anything that the hoses essentially connect to, they're all the AN lines, do not require Teflon tape, so don't put Teflon tape on it because it'll actually prevent it from sealing. But anything that's the MPT fittings, and if you look at them, they don't have the flare fitting on it like that, that's going to all require Teflon tape on it. So we're going to assemble our oil feed block essentially like this here, and then right down here just above the oil filter, you can see we've actually already got this one installed. So what you're going to do is, for the oil coolant block assembly here, you're going to unbolt those 2 there, slide this out, and then this slides in right behind it. You can see ours is already installed right here. Then we're going to reinstall with using the 2 new bolts, and those are going to be M10 1.0 by 40 mil. I'm sorry, those are M6 1.0 by 40 millimeter bolts. So they're 40 millimeters long. Those will bolt back in and hold that there. That's going to catch our oil supply off the block. From there, we've got the 2 oil lines that are going to plug into it. Now, the shorter of the 2 oil lines is going to be the one with the 180 on it here. This is going to go to, obviously, the driver's side. The longer one's going to go to the passenger side. So what we want to do, the 180 here is going to go to the bottom of this fitting here, and it's going to shoot the line directly straight up. The other one is going to be the 45-degree angle here, and that will attach to the top of our feed block right here. And then both of these two lines are going to come up the back side, right behind the back head on the driver's side here, and then we're going to split them out on the top and we'll route them to each of the turbos. And we'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. Alright, now that we're on the top side here, you can see how we've routed the oil lines. We're coming up on the back side of the head on the driver's side here, and then we're just going to run parallel with our fuel rails, and that's going to be the same on both sides. We've got our other line over here, it just crosses over, and then taps right into our 4AN line on our turbos. Now, do want to make sure that on the back side of the manifold here, that we are plenty clear of it, and that this line, as it's coming up, it's around actually the back side of the head. We're not coming up too close to the manifold where it's actually going to burn it. Is it recording? I didn't hear it. Push the button.
It's on.
Okay. Alright, next section, before we install the last of the upper throttle body pipe for the intercooler, now that we've got it in there, we got the radiator orientated where it goes, we're going to put in the upper radiator tube. Now, we're going to actually replace the upper radiator hose with this here. It's basically just 290 degrees and then this straight aluminum. Now, they're going to both come about that length there. So the radiator side one, we're going to actually have to trim it down. So you want to cut it down to where it fits in there. It's a really tight fit between the gooseneck on the radiator and the turbo itself. So you're going to trim this down just so it slides in there, and then basically just slides in there like that. This pipe here is going to go run right underneath the alternator. So go ahead and stick it in now, and then we'll show you what it looks like once we get it in. Alright, and now here you can see we've gone ahead and installed the upper intercooler pipes. It's got the long 90 on this side here, and then just the straight sections coming over underneath the alternator, and then our short side that we cut down is right here going up to the radiator itself. Like I said, it is a really tight fit right here against the turbo, especially this fitting here, but we're just going to cut this as short as possible where we can still get a hose clamp on it and get it installed over that there. Okay, now we've got the alternator relocated. You'll notice that some of the wiring is actually too short. The main harness wire here, which is going to plug into the big lug, that is long enough, but this connector here with the 3 wires is not. It stops back here. So what we do is we go ahead and extend these 3 wires by about 6 inches here. Now it's easiest if you do it one wire at a time, that way you can't get the wires mixed up. Once you get done with that, just go ahead and plug it in. And then we zip tie all 3 of these together. This one here is going to be for the mass air meter, which is going to go right about here as soon as our upper throttle body pipe is in. So we'll go ahead and zip tie them all together and zip it to the, that way it's nice and clean going across there like that. And that should be about all you need for the alternator. Now we're going to go ahead and install the wastegates. Now the wastegates, the Turbo Smarts here have 4 ports on them. They come with 2 upper ports and 2 lower ports. Generally, we're only going to be using actually one of the ports. We're going to use one of the lower ports. So for the rest of them, we're going to go ahead and install both plugs, and it's very important that you put the plugs in here. Otherwise, your boost is just going to basically go through the roof, and it's not going to be regulated at all. So in 2 of the ports, we're going to go ahead and put the plugs, and then the other 2 ports, we're going to put the nipples. We're only going to use the bottom nipple unless you're using an electronic boost controller that's got dual port capabilities. That's when you're going to end up using both of them. But for now, we're just going to concentrate on the lower port. Also, we're going to go ahead and install our dump tube with the V-band clamp here. And then when we install it, this is the fire ring here. This slides up inside of here like that. And that's what's actually going to put pressure and seat against the diaphragm or the valve inside. It's very important that you put that in there, otherwise essentially you're not going to build any boost. Now this is actually going to sit right here just like that, and you can see it's going to go out through a hole here. So what we need to do is mark it. What's easiest to do is mark it, and if you drill a little pilot hole on this side, then you can come back with a hole saw from the wheel well side and actually drill it out. Now you can see we drilled this one a little bit too big because you might not get it on your first try, and slotting it. So then we've actually got the vanity cover here that's going to go in and cover it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this on like this when we install it, and then once we get done, we'll go ahead and use 4 of these self-topping sheet metal screws, and we're going to go ahead and screw the plate to there like that. That way it's all nice and secured, and it's actually got kind of a heat sink around it as well. So we'll go ahead and get that installed, and we'll show you what it looks like once we get done. Alright, now here you can see we've got it all installed. Basically just V-band clamped up in there, and then the wastegate dump tube is protruding through the hole into the wheel well through the vanity plate there, but that's all bolted on, so it keeps it nice and secure. Acts as a kind of a heat sink as well. The other side's going to bolt up identical, so we'll go ahead and bolt that up as well and get that going. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and install the exhaust. Now the second part of the downpipe is pretty straightforward. The flex section goes towards the front, and the hard section goes towards the back. And what you're going to do is line it up in here with where you're going to clamp it on the V-band clamp. And now you notice it's a little bit too long. So what we're going to actually do is mark it on this pipe here, and we're going to cut it short. And you can see we've actually done that on this side over here already. Then what we're going to do is take our 3-inch V-band ring and slide it on there. And that way when we come and mate this up, it mates up like that. So like this side here is already ready. We've got the end of it clipped off. We're going to go ahead and V-band clamp this into place. And then once we get everything clamped up and we're aligned where it's supposed to, we'll go ahead and permanently weld this V-band clamp here to your existing exhaust. And that'll seal up the system and give us a way that we can actually connect in with the V-band clamps to what you've already got on here. So we'll go ahead and get this all installed. We'll go ahead and cut this side down and make them both match, and put the V-band clamps and everything and get it all welded up, and we'll show you what it looks like when we get done. Alright, now you can see we've gone ahead and got everything installed as far as for both the downpipes and that. We got our V-band clamps on here. The last thing that we're going to do is actually do the weld, because once you cut it, there's a little bit of playroom with the V-band. You can slide it in or out, or you can caulk just a slight angle on it. That way if everything's not lining 100% fully, you got a little bit of playroom depending on where you cut it. That way it doesn't have to be, you know, exact and precise. And then what we'll do is we'll push these up just a hair like that, kind of help tuck the exhaust up in the car. We'll go ahead and put a bead of weld on everything, and that'll seal it up and hold everything in place. Alright, next what we're going to do is going to install the vanity cover. Now this is going to cover up our radiator and the intercooler and kind of help direct the airflow so that it's going through the oil cooler, the air conditioning, and the air radiator and everything up here. Blow-off valve we're actually going to do after we put this on. You're also going to want to unplug the mass air meter. You can install the mass air meter afterwards. It'll actually help with installation go on a little smoother as well. Now the higher of the two V-band clamps down here, we want to try and tuck the stud of the clamp all the way back. Let's see if you can see it there on the back side as much as possible, and that way it's not hitting on the actual vanity cover when we put it up here. Now so the way this is going to go on, and your guys will actually be powder coated black. This is just kind of our testing R&D one that we designed up to test it for fitment before we actually make a production run, so we didn't bother painting it. It's going to slide in here like this. Now you have one bolt up here that holds your bumper on, and you're actually going to pull that out, and then you're going to replace it with an M6 1.0 by 40 millimeter bolt that we're including with the kit, as well as the fender washer. We've already replaced it out, so it's a little bit longer. You can see it protrudes and sticks out a little bit further than it does originally. So what we're going to do is the actual vanity cover will clip onto that existing bolt. And you just kind of finagle it around the wings on the side so they don't catch on the strut towers, and then around the mass air meter and the blow-off valve flange here. And then the radiator will sit in it just like that, and you can see on that side it's coming up through the little hole on the cover there. Now it's got two wings that stick out to each side, and those we're going to attach to the frame with a sheet metal screw here. And it's kind of cocked at an angle now, so you see how it's pivoted up. What we want is actually this to be flat. So we're going to lift up on this just a hair, and we'll push down on the front. There we go. So it levels out. And then we'll go ahead and stick our sheet metal screw up in there. And that's how it bolts up like that. And then once we got both the wings done, we'll come back and we're going to go ahead and attach a nut to right here, and that's going to secure the front part of it up along the front, so it should be nice and tight up in there. Alright, now we're going to go over the vacuum system routing. And essentially it's pretty easy. We got two wastegates and then the one blow-off valve. Now over here on the intake manifold, the upper port that goes to actually the manifold itself that we took off earlier, it looped around and went to the valley cover. We're going to go ahead and make use of that one now. So the upper intake manifold, we're going to take the vacuum source off of that, run it down, and that's going to go directly to our blow-off valve here. For the wastegates, you're basically going to go right off of the brass fitting that's on the end of the turbo, and that's going to go to the bottom port on the wastegate. And again, remember, Then make sure the other ports on the wastegate have their plugs in it, and then the top port we're not going to be using for right now. So you're just going to run both sides. It's going to be the same on either side. You just run from the brass nipple right there over to the bottom port on the wastegate right there. Now, right now, all we're utilizing is the bottom port on each wastegate, and they are divided. There's a couple different scenarios where you may actually need to tee them together. One of them is if you see significant boost drop, and that usually happens with bigger displacement engines or really big cam profiles, where at the higher RPM you actually watch the boost gauge and you'll see the boost taper back off and fall. In that case, what you want to do is actually plug the two ports that are on the turbo, and then the same source that we're using up here for our blow-off valve, we tee into that and run a single line, and then split that single line and go to both of the wastegates themselves. That way they are actually seeing manifold pressure at the wastegate versus the turbo outlet pressure, which is going to vary slightly because of the efficiency of the intercooler in that. The other scenario is if you're going to be using a boost controller. What you want to do is from each of the two turbos, you're going to want to tee it together to a single line. From that single line, go to your boost controller. Then your output of your boost controller comes out as a single line, tee that back apart, and it goes to the wastegates. So you're going to actually merge the boost reference line together, and then you're going to split apart the wastegate reference line going back to the wastegate. So they're actually going to be shared at one point on there. That way you're only using one boost controller, and the same boost controller is getting the same reference and the same output on both wastegates at the same time. Alright, for this next part we're going to be installing our coil pack assemblies to our coil pack mounting shields here. So what we need to do first is, as this sits in the car like that, we're going to go ahead and label them. And it's more important to label the actual wiring itself than it is the coils, because the coils we can switch around. The wiring is going to be specific to a cylinder. So on the gray part right here, you'll notice we marked with a magic marker 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's how it sits in the car, 1, 2, 3, 4. That way, once we actually take this off of here and mount it to our coil pack assembly, we'll know which of the wires go to which coil, and then all you have to do is mate each of the coils to our spark plug wires that we already have ran in there, and just make sure you're mating it to the correct cylinder. So we'll go ahead and disassemble this now. We'll get our coil pack assembly built, and we'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. Alright, now we've taken the coils off their OEM bracket and mounted at the bottom of the heat shield here. And the way they bolt up, there's just going to be your M6 1.0 by 50 millimeter bolt with a washer, and then that'll stick all the way through. Then we've got the 1-inch nylon spacer, the coil, and then the nut. And they're just going to basically bolt on just like that. They should only fit in there one way, because if you flip this over, you know, it'd be hanging out here. And then we went ahead and connected our wiring back up to them, and then just make note, because you already marked as far as the numbering of which one's which. So in this case on ours, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we put it on there, or I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we put it on there, it'll actually mate up, and we'll know exactly which spark plug wire goes to which cylinder. And then these are going to bolt right here to the valve cover, kind of like you can see this one's already mated up here. And then we've got our spark plug wires already connected to it there. Alright, next thing we're going to be dealing with is the windshield washer fluid reservoir here. And you can see what we did is right after this 90 degree, we went ahead and cut that off. So you got a straight section there. And then just before this bend here, where we have enough room to get a coupler on there, we're going to go ahead and cut that off as well. So we're taking that piece out of there. So we're essentially taking out the double bend that was there. And we're going to be using this coupler here like that. And then the fill neck will actually go right into the top of it there, just like that. Now this coupler is going to be a little bit long when you first get it, so you're going to have to shorten it down, but that'll give you a little bit of playroom as far as when it goes up in there. If it's too long and sticks out too far, you're going to be up against the wastegate, which is what the original design was. So now we're going to actually shorten this up and slide it back a little bit. Now you're going to need to put the windshield washer reservoir in from the bottom, and then this will actually thread on from the top, and then just go ahead and put it on, tighten up your two hose clamps. Alright, now you can see we got it installed. So the washer fluid was sitting up here, and like I said, all we did was essentially shorten it with that 90 degree coupler, which pushes it right back here. It's got a little bit more clearance room that way. And you're still going to be really tight close to the wastegate as well as the clutch master's fluid reservoir, but you do have a little bit of adjustability with it now. We can turn it and tweak it and shift it in or out. Okay, now we're going to modify the front bumper. Now because we dropped the lower radiator brace bracket down a 1/2 inch and forward 2 inches, we're going to need to go ahead and account for that on the front bumper here. Now you can see we've got it propped up, and this is the bottom side. Now the radiator support actually sits, the two turn down buckles go right in here. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually extend that out about 2 inches on both sides, and then because the whole frame adjusts with it, and this is right where the radiator is, we're going to come back along in here and trim off 2 inches of these sections right in here. And then what we'll do is we'll put another bolt hole that matches this one right back on here once we get done, and that'll allow it to bolt back up into the factory just like it did just before. So we'll go ahead and trim those off now, and then we'll show you what it looks like once we get done. Okay, now you can see here where we've trimmed it down and cut it out, and that's going to allow for the radiator brace to go up in there. And then we cut off the tab here and re-drilled this hole here, and that's going to align with our stud that's already coming out down there. That's going to make this nice and secure. Other than that, everything's going to bolt up just like normal. The actual air duct scoop that goes behind here, you'll notice we also removed too, because it won't fit in there with the intercooler itself. But other than that, everything bolts up just like normal, so we'll go ahead and stick this all back together.